As Gael Ferrach.
Showed you Claare na Gael as bh'aig Seward. I'm Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Have you ever had tell of old Bobby Bob?
And it's my pleasure to present this programme in two languages, one of which is the English language, as in fair earlier, Shannon Gilg, and the other one, that's the Manx Gaelic, Chinyan Amera, the mother tongue of Ellen Fanning, the Isle of Man. As Bannacht and Jurish. In a review of the Manx History, David Robertson is relating the history of yet another Reginald, who was something of a bad lot. In his absence, the Manx people invited his half-brother, the illegitimate Olaf, to take the throne that was rightfully Olaf's, although they'd actually originally invited the illegitimate Reginald to step in as regent, because he was a big, strong boy, whereas Olaf was a stripling at the time. Tan alle van Helsing saige gemaakt Arthur Holmwood as Quincey Morris, as de early John Seward nis, en acht Henk Coff and Lucy Westenra de way follum tre doshele cartnish sa tai meriu. Ach, nish te ko raudau de vel tulju rehiet. We've heard the Carnarvon band BWNCATH in Claare na Gael before, and here they join forces with MEINIR GWILYM, who we've also heard, and together they sing GWILYM mlaen, driving us forward. Tashu geistach rish radio vanning, stasiwn the nasiwn, viskuller scalia mach by Dúlish, Alan Vannin.
Mae dy dlysni di'n llethu, dy saith byth yn methu. Mae dalaw di'n llorio, yr rhaid ydyw morio hi. Sgyn I ddim dewis, ond caru denaid di, a gildio i'r ysbryd, yr hyn sy'n gyrru ni mlaen.
Dwi 'di clywed y sion, dwi 'di gweld y newyddion. Ma' nhw'n deud mai di ffeithwch, di dyfodol y wynllan. Ond dyn nhw ma'n dael adro, dyn nhw'n di clywed gyn ti a fi nad ydyn nhw. Dyn nhw'n di gofyn I ni, achos wlad.
Mae dy dlysni di'n llethu, dy saith byth yn methu. Mae dy alaw di'n llorio,
Rhaid ydyw morio hi.
sgyn I ddim dewis, ond caru
dy enaid di,
trochu
dy lyfroedd di, cofleidiodd di roedd di,
a gildio i'r ysbryd
sy'n gyrru ni mlaen.
Fain fesul maen, carag wrth garag, os bydd yn rhaid, fel na tynwn i'r lle mae lawr.
Mi godwn ni'n lleisio, I ddadneud y penawdau, mi sychwn ni'n dagra, da ni'n cael drws, achos wlad.
Mae dy
Dlysni di'n llethu, dy saith byth yn methu,
Mae dy alaw
di'n llorio, rhaid ydyw morio hi. Sgyn I ddim dewis, ond caru
gildio i'r ysbryd.
Ja, ildio i'r ysbryd, mae dy glysni di'n llethu. Dy saith byth yn methu, mae dy alaw di'n llorio. Rhaid y diw morio, hys giri ddim dewis, ond caru dy enaid i trochu'n dy ddyfroedd di, cofleidiodd di roedd di, a gildio i'r ysbryd, sy'n gyrru ni gyrru ni mlaen.
And that's the four-piece band BWNCATH with the vocals of Elidir Glyn, and BWNCATH were joined by MEINIR GWILYM. BWNCATH is Welsh for a buzzard. Now, this coming Wednesday, the 23rd of August, Professor Andrew MacDonald of Brock University in Ontario, Canada, will be here giving a talk and signing copies of his new publication about the very period that David Robertson is touching on at the moment. Professor MacDonald's new book is A Visitor's Guide to the Medieval Kingdoms of Man and the Isles, 1066 to 1275. His talk will be at 12 noon on Wednesday the 23rd in the Lecture Theatre of the Manx Museum in Douglas. Tickets for the talk cost £10 and you can order a copy of the signed book for £42. However, if you're going to the talk and getting a book as well, it's £50, so saving of £2 there. Now, the Latin of the Chronicles talks of Reginald, Reginaldus, but Professor MacDonald has always used the form Ragnvaldr, which sounds far more aggressive, I think. And with so many Reginalds, Ragnvaldrs with doubtful histories, I wonder, is there a sort of nominative determinism that made Ragnvaldrs a bit macho even for their fellow Vikings? Ach, bishu sorensach merem dort van Helsing, Chaud sio ta MUIREANN on vis quech. Tanish u merem chow mwy as shilia as as clashness as ni ridden ford an a squay chit de ve on. Masaw. Asaw renne duna cooler dorche ad londerega. Nish gus a chow mwy. Doshel lea doris as hulshin mach as fair, as eshen an fair jerry. As hug an doris fo glas na lug. Ach veif jean de vei oer as glen ons na lug atje met die merriushen. Chum millish vei de fagen, de hagen de bodulin reisha, as verlezen esjes nish jen rei hollis edden a bodulin, va crodda as gol sha rosje gie. Gurish tatnius as trimsje bei dunje. Krei chum millish vei de jaren stjag en oer mer enel, na rauw millich eg bes as mulke. Huis de henjacht en Mordenia fagen saljigen djurge se spare, chow hol jane chronk, as clashen for the vine a boeruge ploegich vis kourige mach bij Valjemoer. Now, I just happened across this again the other day, an old favourite, a Scottish Gaelic song by an Irish duo, MONROE.
Horstingo, follow me, Horstingo, when me, Horstingo, Aleshano, Alavire, and Artisan, no Garaka, Hidi, see Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Van der Alla, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Van der Alla, Vein in Fetter Fulmer and Vein in Fetter Falmer and Lohan and Beck and the Maravein with Gresser and hiding, Namarak Nadiri, and see Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Van der Alla, Yellen and Bohan. and bo, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala. Adore she got on the show, adore she got on the show, adore she got on the show, very big grace and I ring the Maraic Nadirigo, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala. Vein in fetter Falman and vein in fetter Falman and Lohan and Beck and the Mara vein with Gresser and I ring the Maraic Nadirigo, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala. Adore she got on the show, adore she got on the show, adore she got on the show, very big Gresser and I ring the Maraic Nadirigo, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala, Yellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Ellen and Bohan and Bohan, Bohan of Fhionnghuala. H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H'H' garaka hidi see Ellen and Bohan and Bohan Ellen and Bohan and Bohan Ellen and Bohan and Bohan Bohan of a Kandala Ellen and Bohan and Bohan Ellen and Bohan and Bohan Ellen and Bohan and Bohan Bohan of a Kandala.
Irish musicians Micheál O'Donnell and Mick Hanley, who played as the duo MONROE, and there with the song in the Scottish Gaelic. And that's from the single that was made by MONROE. Under their own names, Micheál O'Donnell and Mick Hanley, they included the song on an album, but the album version has uilleann pipe drones and a bodhrán on it as well. Va cach san acht ege heen, trom chúiseach as castid. Va Arthur na host. As vei mor dod mi fagen, streppe de higgle en oor as bun soja stiach sa foliach. Va mis heen surrensachs on a goed smoe as je churrit de giaurel ja die aures, as de haiache je Brunis en Van Helsing. Fuur chúiseach va Quincey Morris, sanach je dunje te saiache je de choliunje, as de saiache jou lesh dunnelus kuun, as araldach de choronsgau ulju tege mag giaull. An on a doddy smookel, renne Gyrru a hon plug a brow de hon bege, as gawe toiach der kaidnje. Son Van Helsing, ve got soes ons acht schigger. Hoiach gawe vain fogege, tausmoer je riddenjach voor jean de ve bristag tanne, gurish kiek, va fillet soes de kerelach ons einert ben. Senaienid, gawe maag mam je stu ben enjach, gurish taste na putty. Renne broelige a kiek nen wafer, de min as renne mester stiache se glout eder na lauwenegge. Well, back then to our latest tyrannical Reginald, who'd left the island to visit the Lord of Galloway, Alan Fitzroland, who went on to support him, in fact. And as we've heard, emboldened by the absence of Ragnvalda, Reginald, writes Robertson, and impatient of the barbarity and oppression of Reginald, the Manx invited Olaf to the throne, who, on his return, was welcomed by the people with reiterated shouts of heartfelt joy. Reginald, thus exiled from his kingdom by the voice of the nation, visited the court of England, and, to recover his crown, proffered homage to King John and submission to the Pope. Relying on their protection and assisted by the Lord of Galloway and the Earl of Atholl, he conducted a ferocious army to desolate a country from which his crimes had expelled him. Olaf, being then absent in the more remote isles, accompanied by the flower of his nobility and soldiery, the Isle of Man was thus exposed to the inhumanities of a tyrant glowing with revenge, and to the lust and brutality of his barbarous army. music for a brawl. A brawl is a sort of dance, B-R-A-N-L-E, and that's from the marshy south of Brittany, and it was played there by a 9-piece Breton band, KOUERIEN, which means countrymen, peasants, bumpkins, yokels, something of that ilk.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Stasiwn yn asiwn ta radio fanning o si Claare na Gael bysgol sgelia mach yn sio cartnesh. Robert gytyn corrol sien yn enwm torm so Robert y carslach.
Did the other hear tell of old Bobby Bob?
Ta Claare na Gael rechlaas yn rysjacht yn lwg gol sgelia mach yn chyrchir trwyd yn chraman agert yn y dega radio fanning. As ta Claare na Gael maast yn y chydendŵr yn de podcasten, bis reged yn nasty yn y dega radio fanning, na trwyd yn reich de podcast jou. Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, na Alexa. Our friend Reginald then, says Robertson, having for the present satiated his vengeance by murdering the men, ravishing the women, burning the churches, etc., etc., he fled from the just resentment and indignation of his brother, who speedily returned to save his kingdom from utter devastation. However, in the ensuing winter, Reginald again returned with a few vessels, and at midnight burnt all the shipping belonging to Olaf and the nobility of the Isles, which was then lying at anchor under Peel Castle. He then sailed to Derby Haven, and pretended to solicit reconciliation with his brother by his bold demeanour and subtle insinuations, seduced many of the inhabitants from their loyalty to him. Notwithstanding this defection of many of his subjects, the men of the northern division were determined to conquer or die with Olaf. A civil war was thus begun, which was terminated by a dreadful combat near the site of the Tynwald. Gawe yn eisio, as lugt rolle in skiljegan keul, gawe toiach der seist jachad ons na gegen eder a coolje as frame dorish time a time eriw. Vami goed becken de yindeste so, noder a mi fagus de vrij mi jemachjon na ve de yunno. Jarn Arthur as Quincey geren nis, noder au feishok nis. Dregere, tami duna a time eriw, no vod na njau veriw chitsjach on. As gin and stew shen, tower horstjach on shen, coolina shen, vrij Quincey. Banny me, ne gamanton? Jay. Creve shen tau gin the women, Jay. A hier shaw henke feest vai Arthur. Ren van Helsing troggel en edeg at de harmach, gouds vi cor freget. Aran shiver a charn. Rem mi cor leshe by Amsterdam. Talai em. She fregert ren aglichen a vier smoe mi gredjuach na maastein, as Janie dag vergin na rawe possible, ros Kereel chodjien as vegan allu, Kereel as jinnige corersen jinne wimmige ridden, deisen va skazerike, de vee michrish jelach. Here's a traditional Irish song referring to a French expedition into Bantry Bay that ultimately failed to get ashore in 1796.
Tána Frankig tachtar sála sa tanban bach. Tána Frankig tachtar sála sa tanban bach. Táid a tachla síltiré, sped an sála fáin le. Sped ar náid go cráid tré sa tanban bach. Is come crinúna féine sa tanban bach. Is come crinúna féine sa tanban bach. Yes, vant the land rave, goshkil dar a rover have. Big glanas clee to fuir sa tanban bach. Is a vaimid fos sirse sa tanban bach. Is a vaimid fos sirse sa tanban bach. Bemit ser dir van is krev, bemit ser o hev got hav. Ser got jola kaurn en lever sa tanban bach. Is kein da vägen norder sa tanban bach. in the bh'aig in order the tan van va. Sarah doing book a hort, go the squab in water war. Sweet and food, drop durch the fallers the tan van va. Tane Frankrijk tachter soile the tan van va. Tane Frankrijk tachter soile the tan van va. Heute tacht de sieltje dig, spet en soile van in lei. Spegar not gekroid te treers the tan van va. Spegar not gekroid te treers the tan van va.
And Chan Van Voch, which is a personification of Ireland, and the song was performed by MUIREANN KOUERIEN and the Irish Chamber Orchestra in an album that was released last year and called Róisín Reimagined. Ons táiste dearamach, gau sin na inadan réchit an son de chon, begit de tai meriw, ach, follit as silje pech enjach chit de sen. Van mi goil chimmer Jane Fiorelia as J. Arthur Earlier. Va prindeisach pin liorish na kirten emrosh nish, ons an aal sjo J. Freilara. Ach, na jai, ren mish, derre oer de henne, van mi Julden na Prowlesen, genachten de raume grie ljagige te tjoustaijim. Gerau de rieuw, riegen Jean de weich op ben skenach. Gerau de rieuw, va bilje cypress, na ewer, na juniper, Jean de jinusous grauwage na meriw. Geren de rieuw, bilje na fair moerire, na tassena, go bagertach. Geren de rieuw, bangan, gisterni, go foliachtach. As geren de rieuw, gullerni na maudi voor de wijn, corlied de rauw donne tru de nie. Va tamut ljauwer de hostage Burne woer Fhionnghuala. As esch, fijn allo heng, geer. Reneshina mach mer. And Robertson tells us that Reginald fell in the battle, and, probably over the relics of him and his followers, that noble tumulus, afterwards distinguished as the throne of legislation to the kingdom of man, was reared by his pious brother. Well, on the one hand, it seems unsatisfactory that Tynwald Hill would assume an important position if it's the tomb of a tyrant. On the other hand, I suppose toppling the tyrant is suitably symbolic for the foundation of governance. But, of course, whether any of that's true or not simply isn't known. It's just Robertson's surmise, since the battle is said to have taken place in that vicinity. He continues, Thus fell the tyrant Reginald, whose abilities were great, but his vices greater. As a prince he was brave and politic. As a king, cruel and oppressive. As an exile, intrepid and adventurous. And as a conqueror, inhumanly atrocious. His claim to real valour is greatly diminished by his voluntary homage to John, King of England, and his pusillanimous submission to the Pope. Now, we heard Sue White and Gareth Hedges singing about Truera Agricultural Show last time, though there was a bit of a technical issue with it. It didn't sound quite right. But anyway, here they are with the song about fish and tin and copper, me boys.
Old Nick, as he was wont to do, went wandering up and down to see what mischief he could brew and make for Lansing town. For 'tis fish and tin and copper, boys, tree and Paul and Pen, and one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. Across the Tamar he has come, though you might think it strange, and having left his Devon home, tried Cornwall for a change. For 'tis fish and tin and copper, boys, tree and Paul and Pen, and one and all we may rejoice that that we are Cornishmen. Now went to Lance and he drew near, a skipping o'er the sod. He spied a rustic cottage there with windows all abroad. For 'tis fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornishmen. And in the kitchen might be seen a dame with knife in hand, who cut and slashed and chopped, I ween, to make a pasty grand. For 'tis fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornishmen.
Good morning, missus, what is that? Of all sorts is a dog. There's beef and mutton, pork and fat, potatoes, meats and spawn. For 'tis fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornishmen.
A Cornish pasty, sure, says she, and if that doesn't mind, I soon shall start to cut up thee and put thee in you'll find. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornishmen. In fear he turned and straight did flee to cross the Tamar Quay, and since that day in Cornwall he has never more been seen. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornishmen. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornishmen.
Sue White and Gareth Hedges accompanying there, mentioning the Cornish industries of tin, fish, tin and copper, and the Cornish names beginning tree, poll and pen, and of course chasing the devil who made a visit to Cornwall back into England, where of course he belongs. As we've heard, Reginald went off to the court of King John to pay him homage in an attempt to get his backing, or at least be assured of his acquiescence in retaking the throne of Man and the Isles. Perhaps, says Robertson, in comparing his character with that of John, his contemporary, there may appear a great similitude. Both princes were treacherous, subtle, and adventurous. The English monarch gained the crown by the murder of his nephew, and the Manx prince by the exile of his brother. And as they obtained the government by injustice, so they lost it by oppression. Both offended the clergy, insulted the nobility, and violated the rights and possessions of the people. Both annihilated their regal dignity by submission to the Pope, and they both have now, with great justice, been consigned to perpetual infamy. After the death of Reginald, Olaf enjoyed some years of prosperous tranquillity, revered and beloved by his subjects, and there's a footnote here for us. We'll look at that next. For the hís ag na ráchan de MUIREANN, Honnig sin cuma ben chitrosh, cuma fes ben, va cummel riddenach dorche ag a chliw. Va stap a chuma. As a challenge ren skeld a ray hollis cost na trút na lanchen de vodgel en nimmen it roche as ren a saige gemaakt on de clear, as de yindesach, ben as fault dorche ag, as ish kiaull edach chirich an ai. Chadodgen fagen en edin, a fair vi chrome schies had ish na honnig sin de ve perche fin. Va fergach, as gier jane lid jinteg perche vis na chadle, neg moda vis na lai rosh ail, as dremel. Va sin kortoiach der gol roin, ach ren lau raui en olu, var a agenain chouds ve na jadu chau chulu je bilje juur, cum rail sin. As eish, chouds va sin gian, ren a cumma ben gleisiachen in gowerish. Ve fagus de loer don nish, da fagen de clear, as van ray hollis force on. Henk a chree empien, de ve gevoer as viool. Mark Lawrence on guitar, joined by Ben Gibbs on whistle, Katie Lawrence on fiddle and Russell Cowan on bodhrán. Siodiw stasiwn yn asiwn radio fanning, as dys yw geisdiach cartnish, rish Claare na Gael, mer yn pyn Robert Cytyn Corswell, Robert y Corslach.
Have you heard tell of our Bobby Bob?
Dot mi clash yn scred Arthur, chawds hugsyn en coma Lucy Westenra. Lucy Westenra, a chwish fi cochlaid. Van Vilgid, gint Jewelus crai gyn mychin. As van Glenid, gint immerke rauwenach sen toilach. Gauw van Helsing kesmud mach, as baialacht en chaureege, heisjen ul uronjes. Na keergin, skeelt mach on strain rostoros a tai meriw. Rog van Helsing soes along derege, as renne skirra forsli te chula. Lorish an Sailja, Gyrru, Henker Edin Lucy, Dodgen fagen de round de melen crimson lesh fool oer, as de rowen Sheila rai harische smeglek, as hollage glennid de groen wesh lienek, wasjen krauw lesh goch. Dat mi fagen Lorish an Sailja verkrij, de rauw Dennis Jean van Helsing wel voor Arthur benjededouw. As wij de ren mi gold Graham Jane Maraic as kummel suse, veche dujum. Now Robertson's footnote tells us about this tranquil part of Olav's rule. For defending the sea coast, Henry III, in 1236, granted Olav 40 marks, 100 quarters of corn, and 5 tons of wine annually, so long as he should perform that service. As the power of the Norwegian crown began to decline, the Scotch seem to have mediated a descent on the Isles, which probably forced the kings of this period to solicit the protection of England. Now, that's the footnote. Meanwhile, back in the text we find that Olav died at Peel Castle in 1237 and was succeeded by his son Harold, a youth whose personal and mental accomplishments recommended him to the esteem and affection of his subjects. Soon after his accession, he sailed to Norway and paid homage to that monarch for the diadem of the Isles. Having thus acknowledged his dependence on the Norwegian crown, he was solicitous to promote the security and happiness of his kingdom by forming alliances with the neighbouring princes. Well, now let's join William Matheson, the Reverend William Matheson, on the beachhead of Grunyard, Cion Trai Grunyard. No, in fact, we're going to get, it's Georgia Ruth and a song called Etrai.
Told
from Aberystwyth. That's Georgia Ruth. She's moved back to Aberystwyth now. That was from her very successful Week in the Pines album, and it was called Etrai. By Henry III, who, as we heard, had been making an annual payment to Harold's father Olav to protect the coast, by Henry III, Harold was invited into England, and so highly was he esteemed by that monarch that he conferred on him the honour of knighthood. Soon after he received an invitation from Haakon, King of Norway, and in this court was entertained with splendid festivity, while to crown the honours thus conferred upon him, he married the lovely daughter of the Norwegian monarch. But how fleeting is human happiness! Returning to the kingdom of man with his young and beautiful princess, attended by a numerous train of nobility of both sexes, they perished by shipwreck on the coast of Ireland. This prince was succeeded in 1249 by his brother Reginald, who was soon after sacrificed to the revenge of the knight Ivor, as more fully narrated in the historical account of Rushen Abbey. Well, of course, a story we've come across before on a number of occasions. Treuren Lucy, Tammy Gray Lucy Risherid Varoin a fair Vashenan Cummaec, Fagenshin, Chiarni heen boin les gurnal corrie, Jane lied jinte ket gotch den jou jurgit, Esh ren a Sullian rai herren. Sullian Lucy red a chumma as a geoch, ach Sullian Lucy new glen as ledden de heil nurin, shan a crunnigan glen a mina va enain So tullach shen, ren neva a marnjane graham gul herish gus dewey as fear. De rawi car to send of a marowich, oddins verning yinwe les jaunes kai. Gouds vi Jane ren de Suljanek laste les sailje aan gazerik, as henken edden de we cast eg munge centoil. O ye, huish van me a crowd de hagen shen. Les gleisiach new churmach chiauig as a tolu, a kreis a chri as jowl, a percha, gouds nish vi claimed de brioil as a chliwek, as ish gurnal herish nach herren as mother herish crow. Ren a percha ligamach ein gear as vein a lion shen exochel. Well, sure, this is now William Matheson.
San I count trai gruniars te gak min curi, San I count trai gruniars te gak mi, Fer a harne glaum se voile pullen, count trai gruniars te gak mi, Klatu klataum klamach dich, Klatu klataum klalan, Gerter reicht min klalan tu, Gerter reicht min klalan. San I count trai gruniars te gak min curi, San I count trai gruniars te gak mi, Fer a harne glaum se voile pullen, count trai gruniars te gak mi.
Kiaull Trai Grunyard, where a battle was fought between the MacLeans of Mull and the MacDonalds of Islay, and Lachlan, the chief of the MacLeans, was killed. Ren immerkach a craig in Cree sa Junnu, cor Arthur Arsnacha. Trereni chit roi hugger, les raiach and sheet mach as munga centoilek, charne a heen gowre gromme, as ren follacha and edinegger on Salawan. Well, we've heard that story of Ivor killing the lustful Reginald for trying to have his wicked way with Ivor's betrothed, the beautiful Matilda, but all the chronicle actually tells us is that in the year 1249, Reginald began to reign on the 6th of May, and on the 30th of the same month was slain by the knight Ivor and his accomplices in a meadow near the Church of the Holy Trinity at Rushen. He was buried in the Church of St. Mary of Rushen. So no mention of Castle Rushen at all in that, or of Matilda. As Sinead Cartner, I shall vacate the studio to leave way for the return of Chris Pearson, presenting 2 hours of the best chill-out music for your Sunday evening from 7 till 9. And then at 9 o'clock it's Sundown with Judith Lay. We close with Breton singer and songwriter Marie-Hélène Poupontonnerre. You'll hear her repeat later the Breton word liam, meaning a connection, a link, and that's the name of the album this track, Sabbat Gelted, the Sabbath of the Celts, is from. Ach, Marva mi grey. Shene, Achir Cho, that's it. And so until the next time, this is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert the Carslach. Gael Owl Bobby Bob. Wishing you a very good night. Evi McCreary was Orcelier, as MUIREANN shared you.
Oh